There is such great evidence out there that things like our state buildings and like here in where I live, big hotels and stuff like the McDonald Hotel or castle-like structures that are all over, just littered all over. When you start looking into them, there wasn't enough population to conceive of doing anything like that. Some places they had literally hundreds of people where they were building these castles and stuff like that. And especially in newer countries like Canada, they're saying that, these buildings like Alberta, and where they're saying that nobody was around really 150 years ago. They're saying that all of these buildings were built around 1880 to 1915. And the population at 1915, what was it? 56,000, in Edmonton, but yet, and that's the top. And you go back in 88, I think there might have been 10,000 people in the whole of Alberta. And yet we were supposed to have built with horse and cart, these castles all over the places, and these church and these monuments. And now that I've been looking at it, it's ludicrous. And I'm starting to see the absurdity, like the red pill, you're going down another rabbit hole. So as I like to go down rabbit holes, and I've had to realign so much, even my faith has shifted. And I think that's the reason why I went down that. It brought me into a more enlightened place. But there seemed to be one of those resets around 1900, because when you go back and look at the pictures, you will find the streets are empty. It's universal throughout, I've seen pictures in the United States and Canada, Montreal, big cities, and they all seem to be aerial pictures, which is interesting in its own right, like who's taken them. Where there may be one or two people in the streets, if any. It's bizarre. It's like something happened. And where'd all the people come from then? We've seen a number of documentaries through the years about the orphan trains that went through the United States and Canada. They have numbers like 30,000. It just depends. It's another one of those statistics. It depends on where you're looking as to what the official number is. So I hate giving numbers. It's a fool's game. You're going to find it's written somewhere else, a different number. Anyways, besides that, these documentaries about these orphan trains, where they were bringing these kids as like indentured servants. It would be for room and board, and a lot of these kids were so abused. I see a documentary recently that there are still people that are alive from like the last set of orphan trains that are like in their 80s and 90s. So they were doing this for quite some time. It's really where were those children come from? There's a lot of questions you got to ask, but there's so many suspicions. There's so many different thoughts. Like you'll get that it was from the war, and they were orphaned kids, and all their parents died. We've seen that happen, or so they've told us, throughout the 20th century, where they would get huge amounts of orphans that would get shipped off, get adopted out. Happened all over China, Africa. That's very common. We get these refugee children that get adopted out. And now I'm starting to wonder about that too, just starting to wonder about this whole, where they're getting the children from, That's the last thing a parent's going to give up, right? But anyways, yeah, like the horrors those people have went through. And There's rumors coming that they're going to try taking our children. I don't want to even throw that in there, but. So when you're thinking about these resets and what's happening today, and it looks like we're priming for something like that. That's why it is. When God says, flee to the mountains, take heed, because it's stupid out there. Life is gone from bizarre to crazy. I heard that a number of states, and now see, I heard this from a Q YouTuber. He is ex-military, ex-sheriff. And the police stations were told by the mayor, who actually is in charge of the police stations, to stand down and to allow the vandalism and stuff to go on. And that their hands were tied because the police chief will just be fired. Although, as we have seen, and I hope you guys have seen the videos of the police that are putting their arms down and protesting with them. Still another way of dividing us. It's a way for them to bring in the big guns against us. It won't be for us. So, stop those vigilantes. If you see it, stop them. You have the right to citizen's arrest. And you have the right to do the same force that a police would if somebody's doing something crazy. So, look up the law. So back to thinking, because of taking all of that in about the evidence of resets. I mean, that's just the picture evidence of things that have been photographed. But there is so much in books and literature that that are just all over. That's why people have been combing the archives to get a better idea. The past tells the future. And so there's some great researchers out there. I'll put links. Go check them out, because there is that we can learn from what they've done in the past to protect us today. It's just ignorance. Like, that's what God says. My people will die from lack of knowledge. And I take that serious when he says that. There's a reason why, because whether this is Armageddon that we're getting ready for, or for that spiritual fight, which I think is happening, this just as much could be one of their resets, and they're just faking bacon. Even through the most horrific times, people survive. So getting to know the past is only a protection. Have you liked this video yet? Have you subscribed? It's a lot, and it's a little different than the typical Christian is going to think, and I don't want to. I'm stepping over the line, I know, with people, because they're just hell-bent on, they know what time we're living in. I believe that we are in a time that is crucial and may cost us our lives, but I'm not sure if it is that exact time. But when I was in Q, I had been listening to Benjamin Fulford, Red Dragon Society. He was saying that Israel was planning on an Armageddon event, and they were trying to make people think that it would be the Bible prophecies were being fulfilled. And this when I was listening to this was before I became a Christian. I thought, well, if they're trying to, it's still Bible prophecy. But now with this new information that I'm getting, and that these people do reset the population at their will, and people that survive are the ones that get out of town. So either or, God's people are still to flee, even if it is not just one of their resets. But either way, it will be still a time for us, a judgment time, or soul time. Yeah, I didn't want to get this deep and tell the story, because I was thinking about my family, my mom's family, her brothers. that they were thieves. And they used to steal copper wire from houses, and abandoned houses, they said. And this would have been, the 50s, 60s. It's interesting to know what they were like and stuff, but these people came strictly, like probably the early 50s. 1946, the Second World War, they were still in a depression. Like it was pretty rough. They were on rations. You had to do whatever you had to do to take care of your family. But when you take all of what these people do to us as a society now, I really understand what they were like, because they had no qualms about stealing. And why at that generation didn't believe in paying taxes, and they were very upset. It's like today, they're not upset about paying taxes. They're like, oh, you want to take one for pollution? Oh, sure, you should take some more. Just a little more. Come on, you can have it. That's the way the people are today. Like, it's foolishness. But not that generation. That generation didn't want to give. They saw the government as thieves. I'm 60, so I mean, like, we're talking about people in their 80s right now, so it was a long time ago. Now that I understand all of this manipulation and what they were really going to live like, because basically whoever survives what they plan on doing to us, if we don't stop it, they will be like my uncles, like 10 years later, maybe. They might be that lucky. That's where I believe that we are at the end. But because of the massive amount of what they want to do. But there's also an indication that we're not just at the end, but we're at the end. Because there was this perfect society that roamed this planet, that we see remnants, not remnants, we're living in their buildings, that were all over in every culture. And it was the statues and the books and everything like that come from that time. It's just glorious. It's like heaven on earth. Like, the people weren't in slavery. Don't listen to the stuff that you hear about the slave trade and all of that stuff. This history is so different than that history. That is in thousands and thousands and thousands of books. That have just been sitting there. Nobody's been bothered looking at them until about the last 5 or 6 years, and then these people just started going crazy. And I've started going crazy too, because you start realizing, oh boy, there's such a red pill. But I'm going to throw this question out to you. Could we possibly be living in the little bit of time? Not the Great Tribulation? Because you see this throughout photographs, and something happened about 400 years ago that started to dismantle that civilization. And I would say as little as 150 years ago in some countries that these cultures have been dismantled and taken over. But they seem to be a Christian cultures. But not quite the way we think. The way we think about the Bible and God is because of the people that they put in charge to teach us about it. So you got to step out of that Sunday school teachings about history. But it almost seemed like every district had their king and queen. And they had glorious statues of them. The 144,000 will be kings and priests. We didn't know how it was done, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of parallels when you start looking. It is bizarre, very bizarre. Looks like beyond what I thought paradise would be. Because it looks like it's a parallel of what they would have done if my theory or my thinking is correct. They're just sort of rolling out the same game that they would have done if the Great Tribulation was over 1,000 years ago. And I would say it would be about 1,400 years ago, if my thoughts are correct. And I could very well be wrong on this, so I'm not saying I am, I'm just saying it's hard not to think that way, and a lot of other researchers, Christian researchers who are looking at this are asking these questions and coming to some of these conclusions. Because you do see something that is beyond beautiful and magnificent, and the technology that they had to be able to create the society that we have, just the pictures, is far beyond what we have today. And they didn't just do buildings that were functional. They made them glorious. So anyways, if this isn't history that we've been told. We've been told the history that, 200 years ago, Plains Indians were all over the place, and everybody was kind of crawling out of the caves, and the only people that were ever of any intelligence were the English people or the Spanish people, But then there were all of these savages that lived all over the world. What about those savages? Maybe those savages were people that lived, those indigenous people. I'm not saying they were savages. I'm saying that, that's what they called them. Were the ones that used to live in that society that fled to the mountains, and they had to start all over again because they didn't have technology anymore. And I watched one documentary just talking about this one particular statue, because it was like on tippy toes, and then one leg was lifted up, and it was like 3,000 pounds, if not more. But they were just saying that right today, we do not have a technology to make the statue that he was showing us to balance on top of a post. That's what he did for a living. They could do it out of plaster, they could do it that way, and it will last for a long time. But these weren't plaster, these were, solid stone. There is so much evidence to prove that the society was high tech, had electricity, had transportation, had individual transportation vehicles for everybody, and it wasn't horse. They had vehicles, they had train systems, underground systems, and like I said, electricity and phones and Skype. Pretty much everything that we have today, except for everything was free, it looks like, in that society. Because there was nobody was in servitude in any of the pictures. And then you go from that, these pictures in these books show the magnificence of everything. And then you go from where demons are all over the place. The next phase is where demons are all over, and they're eating people, and they're doing horrific things, and you see buildings being blown out or on fire, and people being in cages, and asteroids hitting, and comets and things like that. It's like this whole period of time where it was evil, and every kind of creature that you can think of is coming out, where there's giants and there's smaller people and they're eating humans and they're roasting humans, they're chopping up humans and they're torturing humans. And then there's another phase that happens, and the next books and paintings and everything that come out are people in horse and buggy, and just a few people, just a little bit here and there, and sparsity in the cities, and that's sort of the next phase, and everybody kind of looking stunned. And then you start seeing the piles of kids, it's layered, and then the population built up again, and then we see that something happened again around 1900. And then here we are. And in the early part of the 1900, because I think a lot of this stuff was still here from that population that was destroyed about 400 years ago, but their technology was still here. So you see us having trolleys and everything, about 1880, and in Edmonton, Alberta, where there was like 1,000 people. So if we are in the little bit of time left where Satan has his time and he is let loose to mislead the nations, it looks like they are following the same handbook that they did prior. And if those books and pictures are any indication, it's going to get bad. But I'm not sure. Because, see, that's not one of my things that I have researched, is that little bit of time. So I'm not really even sure about much about that. I know that still it is accepting Jesus, and it's still that. We're still under that. And coming to God, and that's what the purpose is. So it's still that. We're just that last generation. But what does, if that is who we are? But are we the dead? Are we the resurrected dead? Are we born to the people that were living in that time? The children, just the remnant of their children that survived? And what is our judgment? Are we being judged like the Great Tribulation? So these are all for all of you who think that there is a rapture, is that still happening? So anybody who has looked into, because why would we even bother looking into? So I don't know how many people have actually looked into that last generation, that last ones that are tempted. Because we never thought it was us. So why, right? That was for another generation, but what if we are them? Time for us to start looking. Still about believing in God. I mean, like, none of this takes me away from God. If anything, it proves to me more, if that is true, that Jesus, everything that we've read was true already. And it's proof. By all of those books and pictures are proof that God's kingdom reigned here for 1,000 years, and we're in that little bit, that little tiny piece of time. And then there will be no more death, and there will be no more sorrow, and the remembrance of those things will be gone, and we will live in peace. Either way, keep the faith. Live with love in your heart and forgive people, because it only causes you pain. Talk to you later. Bye, everybody.